Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, our special guest is Minority Leader of the House, Anthony Daniels. Also, APR's Chip Brownlee breaks down the COVID numbers. And Governor Kay Ivey passes her executive amendment. How did she do it? Well, when they won't see the light, bring on the heat. Great balls of fire. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V. Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and today I'm joined by Beth Clayton, Democratic strategist and attorney at law, and my life partner, Susan Britt.
Hi, how are y'all doing?
Doing great. How are you, Beth?
I'm doing great, coming at y'all live from my law office.
Cool. We're coming to you live from outside of downtown beautiful Attala.
We are.
You know, it seems like a million years ago, but Monday, the state legislature finally passed the two budgets. And one of the biggest hurdles, Susan, was the Senate really wanted to control all the CARES Act fund, the nearly $1.8 billion that's designed to go to help restore and repair the ravages of COVID-19 pandemic. They wanted to spend it on other things, and they wanted to keep the governor from having any say-so. How did that work out?
It didn't work out real well. What they were trying to do is use it for corrections, use it for a robotics park, use it, just to basically do anything that didn't have to do with COVID-19. I mean, they sent some penance over for PPEs and things like that, which is just ridiculous. But by the time it was all said and done, the governor sent over an executive amendment to the budget. She was approached by the House to actually pass that, which pretty much put the Senate in the corner and made them have to do what was right and agree to spend the money the way it was intended to be spent.
I mean, Beth, one of the most outrageous things that they wanted to spend money on was $200 million for a new state house. I mean, it's a part-time job. They're not that important. They don't need Taj Mahal, do they?
No, they don't. And let's not forget, they just renovated the Senate, a couple of years ago? The Senate's beautiful right now. The paint's not even dry on it yet. But, we shouldn't be surprised because it's the same thing they did with the BP money when they got that. The Gulf, to help the Gulf, it went to all kinds of pet projects. And, I'll applaud Governor Ivey for stepping up and saying, no, we're going to use this money where it's intended to go.
There's one of my favorite Ronald Reagan quotes was he said that you can't make them see the light, make them feel the heat. Well, she made them feel the heat, didn't she, Susan?
She did, pretty much like Jerry Lee Lewis in Great Balls of Fire. She pretty much just sent fireballs raining all over the Senate. And they're still reeling from it and trying to backpedal.
It was like Darius in Game of Thrones, right? But Beth, this is nothing unusual. We've seen these guys over the years mishandle money in ways it was never intended. But there's real suffering in our communities right now. People don't have jobs. We have 12% unemployment. People don't have jobs. They don't have incomes. They don't have food. And they don't get it, do they?
They don't. And part of it's because, the people making these rules have never really had to struggle or know what it's like to try to make ends meet. And I know some of them have, but maybe they've forgotten what it's like. But I think Governor Ivey is doing the right thing here by saying, all right, let's try to figure out how we can keep this out of our prisons. Let's try and figure out how we can help the faith-based organizations that know the communities the best and how to help their own communities. So I think one of the things we see coming out of Montgomery is you get, 200 people down there who think they know what's best for everybody in the state. And the truth is that community leaders know what's best. So I think part of Governor Ivey's plan that supports those folks is really the right path.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dale Marsh, for Pete's sake, owns his own island. How can he empathize with somebody who doesn't have a job?
Yeah, not very good. And look, they went kicking and screaming out the door, trying to defend the indefensible. And now they're threatening, believe it or not, they're threatening to uphold the prison funds to build new prisons because they're mad at Governor Ivey. I mean, wah.
This is the same group that last week wanted to take the CARES Act and spend it on prisons.
Well, they wanted to buy a prison. They wanted to buy a prison. They want to give them $100 million here, $100 million there. Sooner or later, you got real money, right? Well, it's just amazing to me. Let's look at some of the things that are in the new COVID-19, the CARES Act. There's $250 million to reimburse local government, as you were saying, up to $200 million to support deliver health care and related services to the citizens of Alabama. I mean, how many people have lost their health insurance? We don't even know that, do we?
No, and that's not counting the ones that didn't have to start with.
Right. What's some of the other things on here?
Well, we got $300 million to reimburse the state agencies, $53 million reimbursement of equipment of infrastructure necessary for the remote work, $300 million for technology and infrastructure for remote instruction and learning. I mean, it's going to the right place. It's $200 million from the Department of Corrections to address the COVID-19 that we're not even sure how bad that situation is right now.
They bet the prisons right now say they have one case of COVID-19 out of 22,000 people, inmates. I mean, it's outrageous. That's impossible, right?
They're only really reporting the workers on the prisons.
Yeah. But I think,
what if we did something crazy and used some of this money to expand Medicaid so that these people's health insurance isn't linked to their employment during a situation like this, but they could actually obtain the care they need, not just now, but in the future too? Wouldn't this
What have I told you about logic and politics?
Oh, I forgot. Sorry, Susan.
well, and one of the things is they can use, like they're doing here, up to what is it, 200 million, 250 million to support healthcare delivery. They can't actually use it by federal statute or by the federal law. They cannot use it to expand Medicaid. But I know Senator Doug Jones and Representative Terry Sewell are working on a package that would allow states like Alabama to expand Medicaid. And I think Senator Jones says it best. We now come to realize that our health is dependent on our neighbors' health. And I think that's a winning message for Doug Jones. I mean, it's a long shot, but it's a winning message.
I think it is. And I think it's not just our health in terms of my health is dependent on yours and Susan's health if I'm spending time around y'all, but also our health as a state is dependent on our neighbors, Georgia, Mississippi, Tennessee's health. So when you look at states that have taken advantage of Medicaid expansion and their neighboring states that haven't, that's going to start creating problems because you can't just, draw the line and say, okay, the sickness doesn't travel over here to where health insurance isn't provided.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to learn a lot of lessons out of this. I hope the one lesson we all learn is that we are in this together. This is not something that's just for our neighbors. It's us too. Thank you, Beth, for joining us today.
Thanks, Bill. Talk to y'all soon.
All right. Hope to see you soon.
You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with our special guest, Anthony Daniels.
What are you doing today, babe?
I thought I'd head down to the lake with the guys, do a little fishing. Of course, none of us will be wearing our seatbelts. I'll lose control of the truck, wrap it around a tree, and kill us all.
Okay.
Drive safe, Alabama. A message from your Alabama Department of Transportation.
I'm John Merrill. As your Secretary of State, my goal is to ensure that each and every eligible U.S. citizen that's a resident of Alabama is registered to vote and has a photo ID. If you're concerned about going to the polls on July the 14th, we want to encourage you to download an absentee ballot application at alabamavotes.gov or contact your local circuit clerk. Make sure you enclose a copy of your photo ID when you submit your application. We may not see you in person, but through absentee, we'll see you at the polls.
Welcome back to the V, the voice of Alabama politics. Our special guest today is Anthony Daniels, Minority Leader of the House of Representatives. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Bill and Susan.
You have done an admirable job by most assessments. I know that you have the confidence of your caucus. You also seem to have the confidence of the governor of Alabama. But in this last legislative session, your caucus took some criticism because the majority of the minority did not show up for the last couple of days. Can you explain to our viewers why y'all decided not to come down to the State House and work on this budget situation?
Well, I would tell you, Bill, the criticism came from a certain news site and an individual that kind of spoke out about the disappointment of us coming. However, the same individual didn't praise us for saving the session in March when it was the Democrats that provided the quorum for us to even have a legislative session. And so I was very disappointed to see that. But I would tell you that our caucus position has and will continue to be is that we have more questions than answers. How can you build a budget when your tax receipts don't come in to July 15th? And in light of the pandemic, we don't know what our sales tax our revenue is projected to be. And so we can't even establish a floor. And so who wants to budget blindly? And, we later found out the real reason that the legislatures and the leadership wanted to return to the legislative session, which is to purchase usurp the governor's power and pay $200 million for a new state house that we were not in agreement with and had no knowledge of.
I mean, people around the state, both Democrat and Republican, have just been outraged. Now, Senator Dale Marsh and his gang have tried to walk that back, but they did put together a legitimate list that was turned over to the Department of Finance, and it listed, among other things, a $200 million state house. Now, our state house is old, but $200 million needs to go to the people of Alabama to rescue them and to repair the damage done by, how can not everyone be outraged, Anthony?
Well, I've certainly received my share of emails as a result of seeing that the leadership was sent a wish list that was on that wish list, as you indicated, a $200 million state house. And I responded to this individual that sent me this email in outrage and assured him that, look, this is a part of what we've been saying. Returning to the legislative session without actually understanding the revenue projection, income tax receipts, or to be able to build a budget is just totally irresponsible. But we see now why the legislature wanted to return. There's a few individuals that wanted to build themselves a Taj Mahal and spend money on their pet projects. And so we've seen that over and over again, and it's just really disappointing. And I'm glad that we weren't a part of that process because we want to make certain that we're using the tax dollars of the people of Alabama wisely. And the CARES Act is just exactly what it is. Those dollars are supposed to be taking care of the people that have been impacted by this, the men and women that have been impacted by this, the coronavirus, this pandemic, and those small businesses. And so we want to put money ahead to build and constructing the State House ahead of more testing, more contact tracing, more opportunities for small businesses, and more help for our schools and our healthcare infrastructure. It was appalling to me.
And I think it was to most Alabamians who understand that that money was meant to help, not to give a luxury state house to these
or to
folks.
fill holes here and there.
Yeah. Well, I can't. Senator Marsh has gone on the radio, the Jeff Porras show, and said that members of the House leadership knew about this wish list, this wanting to build a $200 million state house, and other things that had nothing to do with it, just all pork barrel spending. And he said that he basically said that the House leadership had lied, that they all knew about it. I mean, we didn't have any indication that Speaker Mac McCutcheon knew about it until there was the email that the wish list was in, had him CC'd on the email. So he had to know the list existed.
Well, I would tell you that when a lot of times when we talk about House leadership, I think that there needs to be some specificity on Republican House leadership, because my caucus wasn't invited to the table to even have a discussion about what the CARES Act dollars should be used for when these decisions were being made. And so I just want to make certain that we are separating House leadership and Republican leadership as about having these conversations, because our caucus had no idea on what was going on. And I'm curious to know who actually knew about the list and who did not.
How is it that Democrats represent at least 40+% of the state, but you're never allowed a seat at the table? I mean, what is that? How is that good government?
Well, I would tell you that Governor Ivey has allowed Democrats a seat at the table. And so we certainly thank God for her leadership, because she's certainly representing the entire state of Alabama, not one party versus the other. No, we have not necessarily been at the table when it comes to the House leadership. I do think that my colleague in the Senate has a better relationship with his Senate counterpart when it comes to having decisions being made and being inclusive. But no, I've just not. Our caucus has been on the table most of the time as the meal, and not necessarily.
Well, every dog has his day, so that may turn out differently. I mean, do you speak with Speaker McCutcheon? I mean, you're the minority leader. Even Mike Hubbard met with the minority leader every week.
Well, the last time I spoke with the speaker was in April, when we were having a discussion about returning to session, and I informed him that I didn't feel that it was safe for us to return to session. Also, I had concerns about a lot of our members with underlying health conditions, especially those that are of certain age, as well as those that may be younger that have underlying health conditions, and also about the budget process. Why can't we wait until July after we've seen what our income tax receipts are going to be on July 15th, because that's tax day? And also looking at a 2 to 3 month projection of when the governor opened the state back up, seeing how our sales tax numbers look at the end of each of those particular months. So looking at May and June numbers, so that we're able to build a floor and be able to have better projections as to how we're able to budget. Because I expect us to be in a special session at some point. And I just felt that, in previous years, we've seen budgets pass as late as September. And so I didn't understand the rush, but it was clear to me what the rush was after seeing that wish list being revealed.
Well, we want to thank you for your service to the state, and thank you for joining us today. You're always welcome to come on the V and speak to our viewers. Thank you again.
Thank you,
Thanks
and
so
Susan,
much
for having me and what you do to educate and inform the citizens of this great state on what's really happening. And so thank you guys for investigative journalism and putting the facts out there.
Thank you so much. Our special guest today has been Minority Leader Anthony Daniels. You're watching The V. We'll be right back with more news and opinion.
I'm John Merrill. As your Secretary of State, my goal is to ensure that each and every eligible U.S. citizen that's a resident of Alabama is registered to vote and has a photo ID. If you're concerned about going to the polls on July the 14th, we want to encourage you to download an absentee ballot application at alabamavotes.gov or contact your local circuit clerk. make sure you enclose a copy of your photo ID when you submit your application. We may not see you in person, but through absentee, we'll see you at the polls.
Hey man, what are you doing today?
Playing the game. Thought I'd go out for a drive later maybe. Text some friends while I'm doing it. Scroll through social media. Kill a family 4 and a head on collision.
Cool, man.
Drive safe, Alabama. A message from your Alabama Department of Transportation.
Welcome back to the V, the voice of Alabama politics. We're joined now by Chip Brownlee, APR reporter, and so much more.
Oh, and Columbia graduate with a master's in journalism
Yes,
this week.
welcome, Chip.
Hey, Chip.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, you've done an stellar job on the keeping track of the numbers and breaking it down from people. It's interesting. Over the last 2 weeks, we've heard from a ton of doctors who are relying on that information. Also, business leaders. We want to show their appreciation to you, express their appreciation to you for keeping those numbers so accurate. This week, Governor Kay Ivey announced more openings. Basically, the state now is open with few restrictions other than social distancing and those types of things. But the number of cases are rising, not going down, right, Chip?
Yes, that's correct. If you look back over the last week, I like to use 7 and 14-day averages. So basically, you average out the daily increase for each day and look at it over 7 days and 14 days. And that gives you an idea of trends. And both of those trend lines are headed up, which is the wrong direction.
You spoke with Public Health Officer Dr. Scott Harris over the last week, and he agreed with you that we were headed in the wrong direction, but still we opened up more businesses this week. This is a political decision. I understand the ramification for the economy. It's only been a little less than 2 weeks since we did the first reopening. Is it still too early to see what that did, or can we get an idea of what that reopening has done so far?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so it takes about 2 weeks for any change in the policies to show up in the data. That's because you have an incubation period of the virus, which is about 5 days on average. Sometimes it's a little bit longer. And then you have to build in time for somebody to realize they need to go get a test. And then you have to build in time for them to get the test. And then you have to build in days for them to get their test results. And then after that, you have to build in time for that data to show up in the databases that the state uses. So that's about 2 weeks. And like you said, we're just now a little bit after 2 weeks since the first round of reopening. So we lifted some restrictions on April 30th. It's now a little bit after, it's May 23rd, 24th. I don't even know what day it is anymore.
COVID days are like years.
I lost track of time in quarantine. But yeah, so we're starting to see maybe some of the effect of lifting the first round on April 30th. Now, the last time we lifted restrictions was May 11th. And we're still not to the point to where we can say that that's showing up in the data. So we lifted restrictions again without waiting long enough to see what effect that would have on the data. And Governor Ivey has said that she wanted to make decisions based on data-driven decisions, not date-driven decisions. But like you said, I think some of this is political pressure for her to lift restrictions. And it's also, it's a very, I don't want to diminish the economic aspect of this.
No.
It's a very valid concern about, the unemployment rate came out today, and it's 12.9%, which is abysmal. And that's really awful. So I don't want to diminish the economic aspect of this. And I do think that she's trying to balance economics and public health.
I agree with you on that. I mean, and as Susan, as you well know from your accounting days, these numbers, if it's 12, it's really a lot more than
It is a lot more because we don't necessarily base those numbers on people that are actively on the rolls. Usually you get unemployment numbers from people who roll off the unemployment checks.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fuzzy about,
Right.
it's probably a lot worse.
And for the moment, people are getting their unemployment checks. The state's doing a good job with that. One of the things that I'm continually concerned about is that there is this attitude, Chip, that the numbers have been wrong all along, that this is a big hoax. It's not even as bad as the flu, that more people die from drug overdoses, and there's all these false assumptions based on modeling. And they say, well, the numbers are totally changed all the time, and therefore we can't trust anything. I think those are more excuses than anything else, but try to explain for us why the modeling changes and why modeling is a prediction and not a solid fact.
Yeah. Modeling is a projection of what may happen in the future. And so 1 or 2 days in the future, think of it, I think people should think of this like a weather forecast. Okay, 1 or 2 days in the future for a weather forecast is likely to be pretty accurate. A week ahead, likely to be pretty accurate. Once you start getting out 2 weeks, 2 months, 3 months into the future, that modeling is very uncertain. And so when you have people looking, so the main model that everybody's been looking at is the IHME model out of the University of Washington. And I think it's a good model, but when people look at it, they don't take into account that there is this huge gap of uncertainty in that model. Especially the further you get into the future, that gap of uncertainty gets wider. And the reason that uncertainty gets wider is because all of this, it's very hard to model a pandemic because it all depends on individual behavior and all of these policies that we're putting in place. And so that model, the average projection for that model changes a lot because individual behavior changes. Cell phone mobility has been built into that model. Better data, just like going through time, we get more data about deaths and cases, and all of that's being built into the model. So those models are live projections and they change based on what's going on, just like a weather forecast changes based on atmospherics and stuff like that. So those models have always been, not questionable, but they've been uncertain into the future, and the modelers will tell you that straight up.
It's to give you an idea of what could happen. And when behavior changes, they change. And that's the way it always been. We've got about 30 seconds. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, you look at deaths as well, but you also more look at hospitalization. So in about 20 seconds, why is looking at hospitalization important?
Yeah, so with cases and with deaths, all of that is so cases especially are delayed. Deaths are also a delayed indicator, so it takes weeks for somebody to get into the hospital and then unfortunately die. And so those numbers are probably reflections of weeks ago. Hospitalizations are much more current, and they're not affected so much by testing and the availability of testing. So most hospitalized people can get a test at this point. So the hospitalization numbers are more current and they are better reflective of the situation. Those numbers are also going up.
Well, we want to thank you for all your hard work for APR and for the people of Alabama, and you stay safe, okay?
Thank you, y'all too.
All right. You've been watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. Stay safe, be strong, and have hope. You watch us because we watch them.